Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Strange Issue 6. And as we can tell from this, it is a Wong-centered one, and this is a really kind of cool cover. It's different. I like the effective use of white, and the kind of lighter colors of the gold to show Clea, and we got the light blue for bats and everything, and it's just a really different kind of one, and I like the kind of movie kind of poster quality it's got. And I really liked this issue. It's focused on Wong and him trying to get back his memories. It has a very kind of noir detective story kind of feel while giving us more information on Wong, which is really kind of cool. So, we open up the issue, and Wong is pretty much expounding upon how he grew up, how his father and his father before him were both named Wong, and that they were always in duty to serve the Sorcerer Supreme, and the greatest failure is for you to outlive your Sorcerer Supreme. And he was told this at the age of 6. Like, goddamn. And I like the effective use of, like, the nighttime and kind of, like, the kind of neon signs and everything, where you kind of have darkness and light kind of playing with each other pretty well. And he's talking about how that was nuts, and he's like, he didn't blame his father, that's just how he was raised, and just talking about how that showed that his own son's life had no importance at all, as he then gets into the, let's see here, the bar with no doors, as he's pretty much trying to figure out what's going on, and him wrestling with the fact that Strange is dead and he's alive. And I don't mind that he's still wrestling with that. It did happen recently, so it's not that big of a thing. And then we are introduced to Flickering Jenny, who's the bartender there, and she was cursed by a witch with a constantly changing appearance, which would screw her over with having most kind of jobs in the mundane world. And of course, he's talking about how he's trying to figure out the hole in his memory, and I do like the way that they're able to shift her appearance at various kind of intervals, and it doesn't come off as weird. Like, there's no kind of, like, in-between kind of place. And I do love that, like, Bats has a dog bowl, and he's just like, why are you fucking with me? But we see that it's got to be connected to the Blasphemy Cartel, and he wonders if they've been making any moves at this place, and she's like, they'd be crazy too. I mean, we got Agatha Harkness drinking Count Chaos, potentially? Kaoz, under the table, and this is where the Scarlet Witch hangs out. As we see him hanging out there, it's like, that's cool. And, of course, Flickering Jenny is like, hey, listen, I wouldn't poke around at that stuff. It usually doesn't end well, and usually you've forgotten for an important reason or whatnot. And the thing is, Wong's like, listen, I need to get to the bottom of this because I'm afraid if I don't, I'm going to lose another Sorcerer Supreme. And he's always had to handle, like, the Sorcerer Supreme's correspondence, first for Steven, then for Clea, and he's got to know a great deal of interesting people. And it's funny, he's pretty much texting Black Widow, and then he's like, I forgot to tip Jenny. And it's interesting seeing the text log as she's like, okay, come alone. He's like, wait a minute, I have a dog with me. And she's like, why would I care? He's a ghost and he talks. And I'm like, yeah, that happens a lot in the supernatural stuff. And it's funny because Black Widow's like, I told you to come alone. You're lucky I'm a dog person. And he thanks her for coming. And he pretty much gives her the lowdown that they're operate with military tactics and equipment. And since she's the most knowledgeable on, like, military espionage and operations, she's like, alright, I'm flattered. And then he shows her this kind of, like, coin thing, and she can't tell much. It's not Hydra's occult armaments department, it's not 666 commando department or any other kind of squad, but she's like, me telling you what it isn't doesn't tell you what it is either. And then saying that they're making moves in the occult underground for control. And she's being like, okay. Your underground sounds like it's either ungoverned or maybe undergoverned, and when they take moves to get in control, let's see. But when a non-state actor with this kind of resources has moves in to take control, they're in trouble. After all, the state doesn't even know that they exist. Who are they going to call for help? It's like, yeah, it's interesting seeing her lay out the problem from her angle. It's like, cool. And of course, they call for the Sorcerer Supreme. But of course, they're at war now, and Widow's like, hey, when they know your address but you don't know theirs, that's a bad footing. And then she says to send her regards to Clea as she buzzes off on her motorcycle. And Wong then talks to Bats and be like, you could have said hello. It's like, she's really scary. And he's like, you're dead already, though. And it's like, I don't think that's going to stop her. And then, of course, Wong's just trying to think and be like, how could an organization like this escape our notice for so long? And then somebody pops up and like, you're asking too many questions tonight. As we are then introduced to the Lost Boys, who are like glitter punk street gangsters hopped up on pixie dust and ready for violence. And more that they're like adjacent to the magical underground than actually part of it. And of course we then see Wong take out his anger and aggression on them, which sucks, but we see that like all this has been pretty much boiling, and he even is talking about like there's no excuse for this. Without uttering a single spell, they're no match for me with the training and everything, as he just beats the fucking shit out of them. And he brutalizes them because he can't punish himself for his own failures more than he already has. And it's like, I get that. I understand being at that kind of space. And we then see the fallout as he's pretty much knocked them all down. Bats is like, you want to talk about it? And he's like, no thanks, Bats. I apologize. Let's see. And it's funny, and he's like, that's okay. That's a human thing. Dogs know that sometimes when you gotta be in your bonnet, you just gotta bite something. And then he's like, where do we go next? To Central Park. It's like, alright, cool, let's see what other kind of stuff we're going for. And of course, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of kind of crazy stuff. There's a Sanctum Sanctorum, the Baxter Building, the Shadowy Midnight mission, and then the Treehouse of the X-Men. It's like, ooh, that's an interesting kind of stop. And we see that he goes to Jean Grey to help him pretty much get into his mind. And this is a kind of cool thing. He's like, alright, let me introduce you to Bats. Congratulates them on the accomplishments of their people. Jean evidently was a pleasure to meet Clea at the Hellfire Gala, and they're interested in the potential of a Sorcerer Supreme who is not human. Of course, he then explains that Clea is kind of upset because of the distribution of Mysterium they created and used to back their new solar currency. And Jean's like upset. And he then explains that she's more incensed because as a creature of magic and given Mysterium's anti-magic properties, she considers it an act of aggression on par with the example of building and distributing sentinels or backing a currency with Terrigen Mist. And Jean's like, wow, that's unfortunate. And it's kind of cool because they're not fucking with each other on this kind of thing. He's just explaining why Clea would have this kind of reaction to them using this as a currency. And of course, they're like, hey, yep, just let her know. We'll put her mind at ease. And it's interesting having a dialogue like, yeah, that would be fucked up if somebody did those kind of things to have a kind of currency and how that would affect the mutants. It's like, wow, Wong explained that very well. And, of course, he's saying that I'd be in your debt if you'd help, but of course the X-Men remember how Stephen Strange protected them from the Mpox, which happened in Extraordinary X-Men issue 8. And I'm like, oh, cool. And she's like, you owe me nothing. And then they start digging into his memories. And we see all different kind of stuff that's kind of going on, where we actually start seeing the bits where he's trying to remember, like here where Strange is doing stuff, but we see all this other stuff going on as they're then trying to force it. And then they kind of go through and we see Strange's death. But we see that Wong has a breakthrough and sees what's going on with that. And Bats asks if he's okay. And he's like, yep, I have the information. We have one more stop tonight. And he said, yeah, even though you said that I'm not, that we're okay, I'm in your debt. If you X-Men of Krakoa ever require of me, you have but to ask. And then he had needed one further favor, to borrow something, as we then see Flickering Jenny, and then he flicks something at her, and we see that it's Mysterium borrowed from a friend to break her glamour of concealment. And then we learn that Flickering Jenny is not what she appears to be, but is instead Pandora Peters, wand director. And I'm like, I didn't even know about this. That S.H.I.E.L.D. had its own kind of... Now, I know that S.W.O.R.D. deals with, like, extraterrestrial stuff, and it makes sense that they would have a supernatural kind of thing as well. And I'm like, holy shit, this is kind of cool. And S.H.I.E.L.D.'s entire wizardry, alchemy, necromancy department, one, that's a good thing. I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. Of course, he wants to know why she's hiding there, and why the Blasphemy Cartel is handling equipment and tactics. And she just gives this pretty much simple explanation that, kind of similar to when the Soviet Union fell, the KGB became gangsters. Same thing happened when S.H.I.E.L.D. fell. The Blasphemy Cartel is one, and they want me dead too, as Wong is shocked. It's like, ah, shit. So, it is interesting to learn that the Blasphemy Cartel essentially came out of S.H.I.E.L.D. falling, and, of course, Wong falling, and it's like, yeah, people would take that kind of power vacuum, take their own kind of equipment, and take out anybody else that they would deem a threat to that kind of control and power. So it's kind of cool to be like, wow, alright. I think this is a really good way that it didn't take that long to get the information revealed, and that doesn't even tell us completely everything, like what their goals are, their objectives, other than they're making moves in the magical underground and trying to get into their own kind of situation where they're kind of on top. That doesn't completely tell us everything in a kind of story. That can sometimes that's the end goal for an organization or for a group of people. But sometimes that's just the beginning for what they're attempting to do. They could be trying to spread magic throughout more kind of conventional means, or they could be doing similarly to other ones like the negation and the destruction of magic. We'll have to kind of see. But it wouldn't make much sense if, no, granted, it could make some sense if their end goal is to destroy magic, to use and employ magic, so that way you can figure out how to negate it and stop it. But we'll see if there are any kind of divisions in there, because they're like, hey, that could be their objective, but there could be people in there like, I like using this magic, this gives us power, this gives us control to do things. So it's interesting that that is the route that they went for with this. And I'm like, oh god, I'd kind of actually want to learn more about Wand and all that kind of stuff with this, because I'm like, I didn't know about that. That's kind of cool. And I'm like, hey, I learned something. So I can't wait to see how this kind of affects things, how Wong is able to talk to Clea about this, what their kind of next steps and goals will be, and how the Blasphemy Cartel will respond, because they're not going to be stationary in this. They're not just going to stop anything. They're still going to go towards their goals and objectives. So those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.